You wake up tired again? Not just a little tired, but that strange kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. You slept, you rested, and yet your mind feels slow, heavy, almost foggy. You sit there for a moment staring at your phone, trying to remember what you were about to do. And for a second, it slips away. It's frustrating. Because part of you wonders, is something wrong with me? You try to push through. Coffee helps for a while. Sugar gives you a quick lift and then drops you even harder. By the afternoon, your energy crashes again. Your focus disappears. And that quiet thought comes back. Why do I feel like this all the time? Most people assume the answer is simple. They think it's stress or lack of sleep or maybe age. But what if that's not the real reason? What if the fatigue you feel, the brain fog, the lack of clarity isn't because your body is failing, but because your body is trying to adapt to something it was never designed for? Because here's something most people don't realize. Your brain, the most powerful organ in your body, was never meant to be constantly fed. And yet, that's exactly what modern life forces you to do. From the moment you wake up, you eat. Breakfast, snack, coffee with sugar. Lunch, another snack. Something sweet in the afternoon. Dinner, maybe even something before bed. Your body is constantly processing food, constantly digesting, constantly releasing insulin. And your brain? It never gets a break. For decades, we've been told that eating frequently is healthy, that skipping meals is dangerous, that your energy depends on constant fuel. But here's where things start to get interesting. Because when researchers began to study the brain under different metabolic conditions, they discovered something unexpected. The brain doesn't just survive without constant food. In many cases, it performs better, much better. This where intermittent fasting enters the story, but not in the way most people think. Because fasting isn't just about weight loss. It's not just about burning fat. And it's definitely not just about discipline. It's not just fasting. It's a complete shift in how your brain produces energy, how it protects itself, and how it restores clarity. And what happens inside your body during those hours without food can change the way you think, feel, and function in ways most people never expect. In fact, one of the first things scientists noticed was something called mental clarity. People who practiced intermittent fasting began reporting something unusual. Not weakness, not confusion, but the opposite. Sharper thinking, faster decisions, more stable focus. Almost as if the brain had finally turned on. At first, this didn't make sense, because logically, less food should mean less energy. But the human body doesn't work the way most people think. When you stop eating for a period of time, your body doesn't shut down. It switches. Instead of relying on glucose, your body begins to produce something called ketones. And ketones are not just an alternative fuel. They are a cleaner, more efficient source of energy for your brain. This shift, it changes absolutely everything. Because while glucose creates quick spikes and quick crashes, ketones provide stable, long-lasting energy. No peaks, no sudden drops, no mental fog creeping in after a few hours. Just steady, clear, sustained focus. And that's only the beginning. Because what's happening inside your brain during fasting goes much deeper than energy. It goes much deeper than focus. It's not just about feeling better for a few hours. It's about activating ancient biological systems. Systems that were designed to protect your brain, repair damage, and even slow down cognitive decline. But almost no one talks about this. And the reason is simple. Because everything you've been taught about eating makes it almost impossible for your body to ever reach this state. And if you never reach that state, you never experience what your brain is truly capable of. In the next part, you're going to understand what really happens inside your brain after hours without food, and why that moment, that invisible shift, might be the missing piece behind your energy, your focus, and the way you feel every single day. At some point, usually when you least expect it, something changes. It doesn't happen instantly. There's no dramatic signal, no warning. But if you pay attention, you feel it. That heavy mental fog you had earlier, it starts to lift. Your thoughts feel lighter, more organized, almost as if someone cleaned the noise out of your head. And then comes something even more surprising. Focus. Not forced focus, not the kind you struggle to maintain, but a natural, effortless clarity. You sit down to do something, and suddenly, you're doing it. No resistance, no distraction pulling you away every few seconds, just presence. This is the moment most people misunderstand because they think fasting is about not eating. But what's really happening here is a biological transition, a shift your body was designed to make. After several hours without food, your insulin levels drop. Your body begins to access stored energy, and slowly, almost silently, your metabolism changes gears. This is called metabolic switching, and it's one of the most powerful processes your body has. Instead of running on external fuel, your body begins to rely on internal reserves. Fat is broken down, ketones are produced, and your brain receives a completely different kind of energy. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because ketones don't just fuel your brain, they signal it. They activate pathways linked to protection, adaptation, and survival. One of the most important of these pathways involves a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this changes everything, because BDNF acts like a kind of fertilizer for your brain. It supports the growth of new neurons, strengthens existing connections, improves learning, enhances memory. In simple terms, it helps your brain become stronger. Now think about that for a second. Most people go through their entire lives without ever activating this system consistently, because they never give their body the conditions it needs. They are always eating, always digesting, always in a fed state, and when the body is constantly fed, these repair and optimization processes stay turned off. But during fasting, they begin to turn on, and this is where the real transformation begins. Because your brain isn't just getting energy, it's getting upgraded. Studies have shown that intermittent fasting can increase BDNF levels, which is associated with better cognitive performance and even protection against neurodegenerative conditions. But you don't need to understand all the science to feel the difference, because the experience itself is unmistakable. You start noticing things. You remember details more easily. You stay focused longer. You feel less mentally drained at the end of the day. And perhaps the most unexpected change is emotional, because something else begins to stabilize: your mood. When your body depends on constant glucose, your energy rises and falls, and your emotions tend to follow. Irritation, anxiety, restlessness, all of it becomes more frequent when your system is unstable. But when your body adapts to fasting, those fluctuations begin to smooth out. Energy becomes consistent, focus becomes natural, and your emotional state becomes calmer, not because life changed, but because your internal environment did. And this is where most people have a realization. What they thought was normal was never actually optimal. That constant fatigue, the need for sugar, the inability to concentrate, wasn't just how life is, it was a pattern created by how often they were feeding their body. But here is something very important that you need to understand. This transition, this clarity, this stability, doesn't happen immediately for everyone, because your body needs time to adapt. And in the beginning, the experience can feel very different. In fact, this is the point where most people quit, not because fasting doesn't work, but because they misunderstand what they're feeling. And what happens next is the part almost no one explains properly. In the next section, you'll understand why the first days of intermittent fasting feel so difficult, what's actually happening inside your body during that phase, and how pushing past that moment can completely change your energy, your brain, and your daily life. The first time you try it, it doesn't feel like clarity, it feels like resistance. Your stomach growls, your mind keeps drifting toward food. You open the fridge without even thinking, and then stop. Why is this so hard? At this stage, most people assume something is wrong. They think, maybe fasting isn't for me. Maybe my body needs food more often. Maybe this is unhealthy. But what you're experiencing isn't failure, it's adaptation. Because your body has been trained for years to expect constant feeding. Breakfast at a certain time, lunch at a certain time, snacks in between. Not because your body truly needed it, but because it learned to expect it. And when that pattern is interrupted, your brain reacts, not with logic, but with signals. Hunger, cravings, restlessness. But here's the part almost no one explains. That initial hunger is not always real hunger. It's hormonal, specifically a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin doesn't just respond to lack of food, it responds to routine. If you normally eat at 8 a.m., your body releases ghrelin at 8 a.m. Even if you don't actually need energy, it's a learned signal. And when you don't respond to it, something surprising happens. It fades, not gradually, but often within minutes, which is why many people notice something strange. They feel hungry, and then suddenly, they don't, without eating anything, because the signal passed. And this is the moment where things begin to shift. Because your body starts to realize, like, it doesn't need constant food to function. It begins to trust a different system. But during those first days, there's another challenge. Energy dips. You might feel tired, slower, less motivated. And again, this is where many people stop. But what's actually happening inside your body is something very specific. Your system is transitioning from being sugar dependent to being metabolically flexible. For years, your body relied almost entirely on glucose. Quick energy, frequent supply, constant replenishment. But now, you're asking it to do something different. To access stored energy, to produce ketones, to stabilize instead of spike. And that process takes time. During this transition, your body hasn't fully adapted yet. So it feels like you have less energy, but in reality, you're in between systems, not fully dependent on glucose anymore, and not yet efficient at using fat. This phase has a name. It's often called the adaptation phase, and it's temporary. Because once your body learns, everything changes. Energy becomes stable, hunger becomes predictable. Cravings lose intensity, and that constant need to eat begins to disappear. But there's one more layer to this, something deeper than hormones, something that explains why fasting feels so uncomfortable, not just physically, but mentally. Because food isn't just fuel, it's habit, it's comfort, it's distraction. Think about how often you eat, not because you're hungry, but because you're bored, you're stressed, you need a break, you want to feel something different. Food becomes a response, a pattern. And when you remove that pattern, you don't just feel physical hunger. You feel the absence of that coping mechanism, which can feel uncomfortable, even unsettling. But this is also where one of the most powerful changes happens. Because when that automatic response disappears, you start to notice something. You're more aware, more present, more in control of your decisions. Not reacting automatically, but choosing. And that shift extends far beyond food. It changes how you approach your day, your habits, your focus, your discipline. Because you're no longer driven by constant signals. And now, you're operating from a place of clear intention. And this is the point where intermittent fasting stops being just a physical practice and becomes something much deeper, a mental reset, a neurological recalibration. But there's still one final piece, because everything you've heard so far leads to one question. If fasting can change your brain, your energy, your clarity, why doesn't everyone experience it this way? Why do some people try it and never feel the benefits? Why do others stop too early without ever reaching that state? In the next part, you're going to understand the difference between fasting that works and fasting that fails. And more importantly, how to unlock the full benefits for your brain, your energy, and your daily life. By now, you already understand something most people don't. Fasting is not just about skipping meals. It's about giving your body access to a different state. A state where your brain functions differently, where your energy stabilizes, where your body begins to work with you, instead of constantly reacting. But here's the truth. Most people who try intermittent fasting never actually reach that state. Not because fasting doesn't work, but because they unknowingly block the very process they're trying to activate. And this is where everything changes. Because fasting is not just about when you stop eating. It's about how your body responds during that time. For example, many people say they are fasting, but during those hours they consume coffee with sugar, sweetened drinks, even small snacks. And it seems harmless. It's just a little. But biologically, it resets everything. Because even a small amount of sugar triggers insulin. And insulin tells your body one thing: stay in storage mode. Which means no metabolic switching, no ketone production, no deep mental clarity. Just a continuation of the same cycle. And that's why so many people say, I tried fasting and felt nothing. Because they never truly entered the state where the real benefits begin. But there's another mistake, one that is even more subtle: breaking the fast incorrectly. After hours without food, your body becomes more sensitive, more receptive, and what you eat in that moment matters more than most people realize. If you break your fast with highly processed foods, sugar, refined carbohydrates, your system reacts instantly. Glucose spikes, insulin rises, energy surges, and then crashes. And that clarity you built disappears, almost as if it was never there. But when you break your fast with balanced nutrients, proteins, healthy fats, something different happens. Your energy remains stable, your focus continues, your brain stays sharp, because instead of shocking your system, you support it. And this is the difference between using fasting as a tool and just not eating. But beyond all of this, there's something even more important, something that goes deeper than biology. Because intermittent fasting changes your relationship with time. Instead of structuring your day around food, you begin to structure it around energy, around clarity, around intention. You stop asking, "What should I eat next?" and start asking, "How do I want to feel today?" And that question changes everything. Because once you experience what it feels like to think clearly, to have stable energy, to move through your day without constant crashes, you don't want to go back. Not because you have to fast, but because you understand what your body is capable of. And that awareness becomes the real transformation. Not the hours without food, but the control you gain, the clarity you discover, the stability you create. Because in the end, it's not just fasting. It's about unlocking a version of yourself that has always been there, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. And now you know those conditions. The question is, what will you do with them? If this opened your eyes in any way, if something here made you think differently about your own energy, your focus, your daily life, then don't ignore it. Because small changes in how you use your body can create massive changes in how you experience your life. And if you're ready to explore more, to understand what your body is truly capable of, make sure you stay connected, because what you've seen today is only the beginning.